Good day, friends. Welcome to Our Power is Within. I'm your host, Chasmith, and I am on a mission to inspire people to take their power back and help people to realize that each and every one of us has a healer within our own self. When we can create an environment that supports healing and get out of our own way, we are truly capable of healing in mind, body, and soul. Will you continue to help me spread this message so that we can inspire even more people in this coming year? There are several ways that you can help support this podcast and spread this message of empowerment, healing, and possibility. You can take a moment and leave a 5-star rating or a quick review on Apple Podcasts. And of course, you can share your favorite episode with a friend or on your social media and tag me at Our Power is Within. So last week's challenge was all about being silly. What ways were you able to express your silliness? I would really love to hear about it. So connect with me, DM me, or maybe make an Instagram post and tag me of all about your silly ways. Today's challenge is actually going to be a little different, and it is going to be to rearrange something in preferably your living space or like your home office. So not even home office, it could be your work office. And it could be anything. It could be rearranging the furniture around, or maybe you've really wanted this like beautiful, bright, vibrant color on one of your walls and you paint a wall in your favorite room. Or maybe rearranging your furniture isn't really an option because of like a tight space or it just only fits one way. And if that's the case, then what you could do is actually just rearrange your photos or your artwork that you have hanging on the wall. This tends to be one of my regular go-tos. I don't actually even remove the nails. I just keep the placement of all the artwork, but I move which artwork goes on which nail. And this is really nice because when I wake up in the morning, I can always see different artwork on the most common wall that I could see from my bed view. So these are just a few ideas. If you've ever done a brain retraining program, then you've probably been encouraged already at some point to do some rearranging in your life as well, because it is good for stimulating positive neuroplasticity. Not to mention, have you ever rearranged your room or your living room or some space in your house and then afterwards just felt like it was so new and refreshing? I know that I have. I actually really like moving things around every few months, and I feel like every time I do, I always say, "Oh, this is my new favorite layout. Oh, this is my new favorite way of having the room." But I think I say it every time, and I think it just has to do with the fact that it feels fresh and new and exciting. So I hope that you will play with me this week by giving this a chance, an opportunity to rearrange in some capacity, some space, either in your house or office where you might spend a lot of time. All right, so enough rearranging talk. Let's get down to business. Our guest today is Kerri Hummingbird. And let me just say that I really loved my chat with her. I am excited to share it with you guys as well. Kerri shares a lot of her own story of transforming her life from the inside out after navigating through her own divorce. And then we also chat about some stuff today that really gives me some perspective shifts and aha moments. And our main theme is actually all about the mother womb, as she calls it, what it is, and why it's so important for us to heal, and how do we begin to heal it. I really feel like Kerri is up to a lot of really fun things in the world. So please make sure that when you're done listening, you check out the show notes for all the wonderful links to what she has going on and to stay connected with her. Please enjoy today's episode. All right, Kerri, thank you so much for being on the podcast with me today and everyone listening.
Oh, I'm so grateful to be here, and hopefully we'll have a powerful conversation.
I have no doubts. Okay, so for everyone who is listening, I did want to just let everyone know that you are actually an author of several books, and that you've even had one book that lasted on the international bestseller chart for over 103 weeks, which I think is super awesome. So congratulations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I noticed that the three main books I noticed when I was reading up on you was The Second Wave, Transcending the Human Drama, Another one was Awakening to Me, One Woman's Journey to Self Love. And then the third one is Love is Fierce, Healing the Mother Wound. And I bring that up because I think that a lot of what we're going to chat about today is based on the topic of this last book, The Mother Wound.
Yes. Yeah, it's a really great topic, especially for your audience. From what I understand, many people might be already facing some physical challenges, and hopefully, this conversation will shed light on some of the aspects that could be ancestral and emotional.
hmm Awesome. I love it. Um, and I was thinking that to get started, maybe we could give you the floor and let you just share a little bit about the work you do and what led you into this line of work, into this path, into these passions, and just kind of, a little bit about you.
Absolutely. So, I began this work. I had no idea I was going to be doing this work. I mean, do any of us really know this? I'm not sure if anybody really knows this from birth, but I certainly didn't think so. I was just living my life. I was pursuing my passion for art. I was making good money as a high tech um, technical communicator in Silicon Valley. And then I had my first baby, and things really radically shifted for me. I found myself in some postpartum depression. I had definitely been a person that was concerned with my mental health since I was 15. So it was not that I never had any challenges before, but that challenge when I had my first baby was just so profound. I think my expectations were so high that I was going to just be lit up and enjoy this process. And I ended up feeling like I don't know how I'm going to do this for the next 20 years. And now my son is actually, today we're recording on the day of his 22nd birthday, so
Oh,
it's kind of
wow.
kismet. But yeah, it was he really woke me up. He woke me up to a lot of things that I had not really dealt with deeply enough. So I had done psychotherapies. My mom and my dad were very open to that when I was 15 and I was going through struggles with um, my sexuality and promiscuity, um, and trying to understand myself as a young person and having a lot of depression and suicidal ideation even at 15. And so my parents put me in psychotherapy as a modality of healing, and I definitely got so many benefits from being in it, but it just didn't get deep enough. And that's what I realized when I had my first child and I went into that postpartum depression, was like, wow, there's something bigger going on here. It's beyond the mind. It's not just mind. But I don't know what to do, and so I just have to cope with this because I've got to be highly functional to take care of my baby. So I went on the not feeling pills, which are often prescribed for women in situations like that. And I started taking those pills. And so for 13 years, that was my solution. It was sort of like, okay, take these pills. I can cope with my life. I can ignore that I'm having underlying symptoms of bigger things going on, and just sort of like force my life to happen and try to force it to be beautiful. And so I did that. And I had a very challenging marriage. There's just very lots of wounding back and forth each other, and then trying to do our best to, to have a good relationship. And certainly, I think many of us get into marriage and parenthood thinking we're going to do it better than our parents did. And I quickly was realizing that was going to be a tall order. Like, how am I going to do
Yes.
that? I don't know.
Yeah, because you didn't like you had the desire, but not necessarily the skills yet or the healing.
Yeah, and my parents were great role models for me too. So there was just some big disconnect, and it didn't make sense because I'm a pretty smart woman. I went to a really good college. I went to an Ivy League school. I got a good education. There really wasn't any reason for me not to get it, but except that there is reasons. We'll talk about some of that today. Um, but yeah, so I just kind of continued on as many people do, just coping with it until it just got to a brick wall. And for me, that brick wall came after we moved closer to my parents to get some support with the children, because by now I had two children. And I thought, okay, I will take a break from all the things I'm doing, and I will just be a mom. And I tried that, and it was really hard. And I didn't have a sense of identity. I didn't know who I was, and that provoked just so much in me that I I really felt so squirmy, I couldn't do it. I had to have a hobby, so I started another company, like, to try to avoid it. And that for another 5 years or so, I just hit a brick wall. It was just I can't go on like this. Like, this marriage, the way I feel about myself, psychotherapy was getting more dire because I was getting labels now and diagnoses, and nothing was feeling good. So I ended up at the dark pit of despair that often we call the dark night of the soul. And I decided, I can either die or I can take a risk and just stop everything I've been doing that should have worked but didn't, and try something else. And so that's what I chose to do, because I wasn't going to leave my kids without a mother, and I had to find a way to be happy. And that's really that pivotal decision, stepping out into the unknown, leaving my marriage of 20 years, leaving psychotherapy. Like, that's not a modality that was working for me. And within 6 months, getting off all of the SSRI medications. That was really my path to healing. And there's more to it, but I want to just pause for your questions or whatever you want to say about all that.
Wow, that's well, I mean, I'm so curious, like when you're at that brick wall and you're thinking about, okay, these are the two options. How do you choose option B? I mean, obviously, I know for me, I would choose option B too because option A just wouldn't really be end up being an option for me. But like, how do you step into option B? Like, where do you did you do it all alone? Did you have support? Where did you muster the strength? Like, when you're trying to do something totally different, how do you know what to do when it's totally different than anything you've ever known or done?
I had this little gift, and I don't even know how this little gift came into my hands, but it was the book Eat, Pray, Love. And I
Oh.
was reading that book, and there was one point where she said that she got down on her knees and started praying to God. And I thought, this might be my moment, to do that. Like, this might be my chance to, like, open up to some bigger help. And I actually did it, out of desperation. I wasn't raised with any religion, so I didn't have any programming there about or conditioning about religion. Nature had always been my religion, just being outside, and I loved to paint landscapes and be in nature. So I wasn't really sure how to go about that part, but I did. I just opened, and I actually in my bathroom got on my knees and was like, please help me, God, if you're there. Like, I need some help right now. And it was so cool because the tears stopped for just a moment. It was
Mm,
like the tear spigot got turned off for just a few moments. And because I'd been crying nonstop, like I could not stop crying. Um, and so that was that moment of peace. And I hadn't had one of those in so long that I was just so grateful for it. And I think that moment of peace led to some more moments where I connected to this something bigger,
mm-hmm.
and I got some courage. And then I got like what I call a spirit sign. I hadn't had very many of these, but I got this right before I left my former spouse. I got this vision of the end of the rope. Like, that phrase is so powerful when people say, "Oh, it's the end of the rope. That's the end of the rope." And I was like, "What does that even mean?" But in this moment, I saw this ship's knot, like, knotted up and, like, tied off around one of those moorings, and all of a sudden, the knot, the rope just went poof. And I heard this voice say, "That's the end of the rope." And I said, "Well, that's it. I'm done. I'm leaving this place. I'm not sticking with whatever it was I was doing because it's not working."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was terrified those first few weeks of making that decision. I didn't tell anybody. I was privately researching, um, calculating. I hadn't really been working full time, so I was trying to figure out how much money can I earn on
Mm,
my own. Like, what kind of place can I move into? What can I afford? What landlord is going to let me do all this privately without checking my credit, so that he doesn't know what I'm doing? And how can I get money out of our personal account so I have something to start with before he finds out, in just case he gets nasty? I didn't know what he was going to be like. So I was afraid. And as it turned out, he was never nasty about it. He was hurt, um, but it was actually a pretty smooth transition at first. And I was able to find a spot to land and I was able to start a new life. And, we were able to negotiate child handoffs and things like that. Um, but it hasn't been, divorce is really hard. It's just hard to go through.
Yeah.
And I didn't have consciousness tools for going through it. I was kind of learning on the fly as I was working on myself post divorce and learning how to negotiate with this person that I couldn't negotiate with when I was living with him.
Right.
So yeah, what was really interesting is how separating households made it really clear what was happening from him and what was happening from me. And that part was extremely empowering for me because I was no
Mm.
longer tangled up inside weird dynamics where I'd be scapegoated or blamed for things that were not me, or like having things projected on me as if I'm part of something I'm not intending to be part of. And so for me, like having my own household was like a breath of fresh air. It was like the first time I hadn't had conflict in 20 years.
Wow. That's amazing. And so you were saying that when you first were navigating through this divorce, you didn't have like the consciousness, obviously, that you do now. So that really was the catalyst. And from there, you just started obviously continuing to grow and work on yourself and figure out what you had to do differently.
Exactly. It was kind of like, fly by the seat of your pants and figure it
Hmm.
out, as you're going
Yeah.
and try to do the least amount of damage as possible. I definitely had some moments where I did not practice restraint and I said things or got or reacted to things in a hurtful way because I was feeling hurt. And I started seeing that if I was going to behave that way, it was going to create hard experiences in my family.
Hmm.
And especially for my kids, that's what I started really seeing more. Because the more you work on yourself, like this is just what I found is the more I worked on myself, the more that I realized the impact of my words, actions, and feelings on people I loved because I was clearing up my insides enough that I could pay attention to another person. And what I really started noticing was just how different my son's father and I were. So different in perspective, in modalities of parenting, just like everything was the opposites. And I got this chance of like healing and clearing out my resentments, like really long resentments that I held in because I didn't want to pick a fight because my mom at one point my mom was like, "Why are you letting him walk all over you?" And I was like, "I have to pick my battles."
Hmm.
I was so suppressing my own voice, but I was doing that to myself because I lacked the confidence to stand in what I knew and my intuition was right for myself and for the boys. I lacked that confidence to stand in it and speak it. It took
Mm.
me a lot of support and spiritual work to get to the place where I could stand in my truth. And what I'm grateful for is my boys watched me go through that whole process of claiming my voice. Like they watched me like pretty much change before their eyes over, this last um 10 years of reclaiming myself and changing who I'm showing up as. They got like front row seats. Like this is what it looks like when somebody changes, when somebody goes through a spiritual awakening, when somebody practices self mastery, when somebody takes responsibility. That's what it looks like. And then they got to witness whatever was going on at their father's house and kind of make their own ideas about, well, how do I want to be in the world? Like
Right.
what's my model I want to follow?
Yeah, that's so awesome. What a gift too, right? Like cuz when we know that when we're doing the work for ourselves, like you had already said, you realize the impact that your feelings and actions and behaviors had on people you loved. But, taking it a step further, when we are doing the work, when we're choosing to grow, when we're choosing to step into our truth, especially if you're a parent, that affects how you're parenting and how you show up as a parent, and it leaves an imprint on the children in a really positive way.
It can, yeah, and giving them the space, like, the stronger I've become as a mother, and it has to do everything with my ability to speak my truth as a woman and to know my intuition and to know my inner power, and to not shy away from conflict, but to lean into uncomfortable situations and to trust that there is diplomacy in my heart and that I can bring that into fruition if I'm patient enough. Um, this is all like, it's like an embodied teaching to my kids. And I became strong enough that I could even um, listen to very painful things that they were relaying to me that they were getting trained in the other household to believe. And I was able to listen to those things with my heart wide open, even though it was about me. And I was
Mm,
able to say, wow, that must really hurt to believe that that could be true. I'm so sorry that that's what's being shared with you. And how does it feel? And I'm here to listen to how it feels for you and to be here for you while you experience that and really work through it. My sons being able to feel what they're feeling and have their life experience be validated, even if what they're saying is something I know isn't true about me.
right. Right.
But
Yeah.
they have to know it, that's the thing.
Right. Right. So I actually, it's so cool. I want to talk about feeling the feelings, but I want to ask something else first. I'm curious because when you first started this huge life shift about a decade ago, you said you were kind of on your own. But along the way, you've obviously come really far. So, along this path, along this journey, for you, were there any huge catalysts that really supported your growth and you stepping into your truth? Like, what helped you along the way? Were there books, events? Like, did you have coaches or like mentors? Like, what did you find really helped you, at least in your journey of discovering what you know today?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first thing that helped me was a woman who was living with my mom who had been through a divorce. And she introduced me to several things that were really helpful. So I think the power of sisterhood is so beautiful and such a gift when women can support each other through challenges without like sort of giving advice or judging or gossiping. But when a woman truly is in her heart and she can say, I really empathize with what you're going through, this is what helped me, I don't know if it'll help you or not, but I'm just sharing what helped me. And so she did that with me, and that opened many doors for me. I mean, she opened me to yoga. I found my first spiritual mentor in yoga. He played vinyasa to Led Zeppelin, like he did vinyasa to Led. I was like, I can handle this. This is like I can handle this. This is good. So, she also opened me to shamanic healing. She had mentioned it to me one day and said she had got this big energy healing, this shamanic healing, and it had helped her. And I said, so I went home that night and I looked up shaman in Austin, like, why not? I'll just Google that. And I found my first teacher who gave me my first healing, which really set me on a course to remember that this is what I'm here for. And today it's what I do. I lead groups, I teach people how to reclaim their power, and I teach them earth-based spirituality and how to connect in with the inner power. So I actually studied with many different teachers. I was like there was a buffet of spirituality and I was like loading up my plate, like how much more can I eat? Like I just want to eat all of this. I think a pivotal book I read was Don Miguel Ruiz, The Four Agreements. That book, I wished I had read that in third grade. I mean, I read that book about 30, 40 times front to back when I first got a hold of it because it seemed so simple and it seemed so clear. And then I would go out to practice it and I would like stub my toe, you know?
So simple and yet not easy.
Not easy.
Yeah, that's a great book. And you're right. That's like definitely one you do need to read over and over to like, you need that repetition.
Yeah, I had to retrain my brain and I actively knew that I was retraining my brain. I mean, there were so many places I went along the way. And, my body was a great teacher. I want to talk about body because you were talking about your audience and many facing physical challenges. I learned in my first shamanic program, they talked about the states of being, and they talked about we don't just have one body. Like I always thought I was just one thing. So when I learned that I wasn't one thing, I was fascinated. And then I learned, oh, I had a mental body and I'd been working on my mental body for like 20 years in Psychotherapy Weekly. Okay, great. I've got that one. I've already navigated that space. I understand it very well. Now I need to explore the other bodies because that it's not serving me to stay in my mental body. So I learned about the emotional body and how important it was to feel my emotions. And I started getting permission to feel my emotions for the first time in my life, when most of the time people felt bothered by them. I mean, I have a big channel. So admittedly, if I'm feeling sad, it's a big experience for everybody that's around me, not just me. So I learned about that. I learned about that I have an energy body. Like, wow, what is that? I have a spiritual body. I have a soul. What is that? I learned about that. I actually got to practices where I started being able to like experience it tangibly. It's like, wow, okay, that's what that is, especially during the healing I mentioned. I got to feel my energy. It was like, wow, this is an aspect of me. And then my got to realize my body was talking to me. Like that my body didn't just it's not just something I'm like, running ragged until I die. It's actually a beloved animal. It's like an animal, like a dog or a cat. And I'm like in this being that's like sensitive and like a horse, and it's got feelings, and it's got sensations, and it's alive, and I'm not just going to run it ragged. I'm going to like love on this body. And one of my first huge lessons around that was after I left my marriage, about 8 months later, I was doing all this yoga and I couldn't bend over on my side. And when I went to the gynecologist, to the doctor, she basically said, "Well, you've got a huge cyst on your ovary, and it's the size of a grapefruit. Like, no wonder you can't bend over." So I had this energy healer, because now I'm into energy healing, right? Because I discovered this thing and I was like, "This is cool. What is this?" And she put all of the like anger. I was so angry, resentful, and upset in with my marriage, and I she took all of that and put it inside that cyst, so that when I went to have it removed, I mean, it felt like a weight had been lifted from me. I felt like I was so happy. I felt light. I was in the recovery room and the nurses are coming in to check on me. And I'm like, I'm so happy. And they're like, you're so weird. Normally people are not like this. Like, what is going on with you? And I'm like, I'm so relieved. You guys took my marriage cyst. You took like 20 years of pain out of my body. And they were like, wow. It was
Yeah.
profound.
Yeah. Sometimes they don't get that still.
I
Did they
know.
get it? Did they
They
get it?
kind
Or
of looked at me strangely, but they said, "Well, we've never seen anybody be this happy in the recovery room, so whatever you're experiencing must be true for you." I was like, "That's right, it is. I'm
uh-huh.
glad that's gone." You know,
Yeah,
Get
right.
out
For
of
more
me.
reason than one.
Yeah,
Oh, that's so
exactly.
awesome. Like, let's talk about this because I know at the very beginning I said we were going to talk about the mother wound.
Mhm.
And so anyone who's listening is probably like, okay, well, what's the mother wound and where are we talking about this? So, for people who are listening, could you explain um, to them what the mother wound even means and what it is, and kind of tie it in and relate it to like what we're getting at and what everything with everything we're already talking about?
Yeah, it's like pretty much the mother wound is everything we just talked about. So if you resonate with anything I said, that is part of the mother wound. And, so you could think of it like this. Women have been taught to be pretty and quiet, to be pleasing, to be fawns, to be little helpless does that walk around and, are just pleasing for men. And then to, capture yourself one of those men, and then pretty much subjugate yourself, to whatever degree. That's like the overall like dream of our planet right now, which has been created by the patriarchal vision. And there's lots of places in the world where a woman can't have a conversation like I'm having here with you today. It's not allowed. We're very fortunate as Western women that we can have these conversations and we can talk about our menstrual cycle as something that's beautiful and sacred, that we can talk about our womb and talk about our womb in such a way that it's done without shame. We could talk about our sexuality without shame, and a lot of my awakening began because, funny enough, because I started feeling good. And how did I start feeling good? This is like 2 years before the end of my marriage. Is that a friend brought me to a slumber party, and at slumber parties they sell toys that help you satisfy yourself. And I would never have one of those before. I was just so like frigid about my sexuality, just really not okay with it. And I went to that party and I bought one. And actually, I experienced ecstasy for the first time in my body. And what that did was it woke me up out of the dream of pain and suffering to know that I could have an ecstatic experience inside my body, an ecstatic divine experience. So the mother wound is, programming women to be, really uncomfortable with their bodies, to be ashamed of their bodies, to be thinking their bodies aren't good enough, to be comparing us to each other, to not use our voices because we don't want to rock the boat, or we want to make people happy, or we want to please people, and to shy away from conflict, and to the detriment of our own bodies. That cyst in my ovary was because I wasn't able to speak my truth and be present with a conflict. I was taught to please people. And my mom didn't even intend for me to learn that lesson. I learned it from watching my whole life and everything that was happening and how people got acceptance from each other.
Right.
So, this is powerful stuff. I mean, it's so pervasive. It's everywhere, Shazma. Like, it's everywhere.
Does this mother wound then, is it just for in women, or can men have it experience this wound as well?
Well, it's everybody, because this is really interesting to think about. If you consider Masaru Emoto, he did all this work about water, and he actually published studies and studies and books on his studies with water. What he learned was that if he pumped the water filled with beautiful intentions and then take a little piece of that water and freeze it, he'd find a beautiful snowflake that was perfectly symmetrical. Yet if he conversely held some water and said mean things to it, and then did the same, took a little drop of it and froze it, it would be this misshapen, even discolored snowflake. So we're 70% water. So think about that for a second. We're 70 or 80% water, somewhere in that spectrum, and we're birthing a baby's consciousness inside of us. So whatever our level of self-worth and love for ourselves is, the baby is being sort of stewed in that level of consciousness and that understanding of self. And you could imagine that a lot of women have not been feeling really a lot of self love or acceptance. And now we have a baby forming inside of us. We're just passing that inheritance to that baby. And there's, in this moment, for anyone's heart who's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. Please don't go into self judgment, because that's the pattern, right? To judge ourselves. That's exactly the pattern. It's nobody's fault. It's just the conditions that we were born into and that we perpetuate because we don't know that it's happening at a level that we can do something about it. So now that you have awareness, you can do something about it. And that's love yourself, And that's why I'm calling forth women and mothers to love yourself, like love yourself. Because if you love yourself, all that healing that's going to happen inside your body is going to also heal your ancestry, because our ancestors live within our bodies. It's going to heal our children because our children are connected to us for life. It just heals the whole family system the more that we can love and accept ourselves. That's really the powerful work of the planet, especially women and mothers can be doing right now. It affects our sons for sure. It affects men, absolutely. And in this change, it's like we're so angry with men, but like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? So we have to just back it up and take responsibility for healing all of this hate and division and grief and war and all the things, and just bring love to it by bringing love to ourselves first.
Mm-hmm. 100%. 100%. I love that. And how does one begin to love themselves? It's like $1 million question, like, or it's like well, I do love myself. I've heard this a million times. Oh, I love myself. But every action from that person shows absolute opposite of love. So how do you even begin to love yourself if you don't even know you don't love yourself?
Well, first you have to discern that there's different definitions of love happening on the planet at the same time. And all of the understanding of love has to do with the conditioning that person received in their ancestral inheritance, experienced in their family systems as their brains were forming, and just had like an inner realization about. There's also just inner knowing. So for me, I had a lot of trauma growing up. My mom married someone, didn't think she would ever get pregnant, got pregnant, and went, "Oops, this isn't the right person to have a baby with." And because he had so many childhood wounds of his own, and he was going to be molesting me if she stayed. So she was very courageous and she left. So something in her said, this is not the loving environment I want my child to have. And I feel enough conviction about that that I'm going to take the action to leave. Okay, so that's huge. Then she married somebody from when I was 1 to 5 who was presenting as a wonderful human being with a good paycheck. And he ended up being a violent drunk. So again, my mom needing to find the resources within herself to love herself and to love me enough to get us out of that situation. And it took her 5 years to figure out a way to get out of that mess, but she got out of it. And then the third man she married turned out to be my dad, the man I call my dad. That was her husband for 45 years until he passed away a few years ago. And that man changed everything in our lives because he was a reflection of my mom's decision to love herself and to love me. He was a man that respected her and honored her. And the only way she attracted that was because she overcame her victimization that had attracted the first two husbands.
That's so awesome. And that's what we have to do.
We have to do the work. We have to first recognize, wow, I'm in a pattern. I'm married to the same person, different face, or I'm experiencing not love, not as loving as I know in my heart it could be. And I have to look within myself to find out why. And as we take action for ourselves, I love this phrase I learned from some friends of mine, love in action. As we start to become love in action for ourselves, that counts like so much to our inner child that's still in there, to every woman we ever were, to our ancestry, to our bodies. Like that message is heard loud and clear. Like when my mom told that second husband, "You will not abuse me anymore, and I am leaving you." And he crumpled on the floor in front of her feet, weeping, and just like, "Please don't go." My mom claimed her power over somebody she was terrified of because of what he was doing. And that strong woman is who attracted my dad. And my dad respected her and honored her for 45 years. So it starts on the inside. So when I began my journey of dating, I just want to bring this piece in because it's really pivotal. So in my early framework was like a big crack. And the crack was, what is love between a mother and a father? Because I saw three different things. So which one's true? So I feel like part of my inquiry in my relationships was that question. And sometimes I would attract somebody who was like father number one. And sometimes I would attract somebody that was like father number two and spend 20 years with them. And then sometimes I would attract somebody who was like father number three.
Well, also, it sounds like the father number 1 and 2 were in your early years, which is where we're so imprinted and conditioned, and where we're like where those patterns are kind of like becoming patterns, like they're becoming a part of like our nervous system in a sense. So it's like almost like even though you ended up with this really wonderful father that and your mom and dad had this role model of what a good marriage could be for you, it did come like a little later. So I wonder if it's from the imprinting from the earlier years.
Yeah, it's absolutely the imprinting from the earlier years. And I want to say, like, if you're a mom and you're thinking, gosh, I really screwed up because my kids' lives from 0 to 5, this is what was going on for me. Just take a deep breath because I want to share something else, which is I've learned and this spiritual side, this is why I love bringing the soul in, the spirit of the soul lens, just take off the human glasses, put on the soul glasses and see it from new eyes. We chose our parents, we
Hmm.
chose our circumstances, we chose all of that because we wanted to embody an experience that we needed in order to fulfill the dharma or the life purpose that we wanted to do in this lifetime. So we had to experience it from the inside out in order to understand it well enough to do our dharma, our life's purpose. It's like you can't talk about being a mom really that well without actually having embodied it. Like when you've embodied it and you know what it feels like to have a baby inside you, you totally get it. And when you don't, you're trying to get it, but it's hard. Just like with an orgasm. If you've never had an orgasm, you're kind of wondering if you've had it or not. you know, and then you have one and you're like, oh, that was one. Okay, I wasn't having it before. Now you know. So it's like that. Like everything in life, we have to experience it on the inside to know it. And if you need that thing for your life's purpose, then you got to experience it. So it's kind of like that's how I healed my mother wound with my mom because my mom was doing everything along the way to protect me with the best of her abilities and the time that she was living in where she didn't have the freedom and she had to have a man in order to survive, all of these things. And yet, the paradigms that got set in my brain made it really difficult for us to bond because one of the dynamics was that the violent father, he would beat my mom if I made him upset with my child behavior. So there was
Mm.
like this built in pattern that started in my brain of taking care of my mom rather than myself, you know,
Yeah.
and maybe you can resonate with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have to, those things are there for a reason so we can work through them in our soul's curriculum.
I really like that you said that. I truly believe that as well. I really like in my heart and soul believe that we chose it all. Like we chose it all. And you know, one of my friends and I were talking once and we're just having this conversation about all this stuff and it's like this was my conclusion. I was like, okay, at the end of the day, like we don't really 100% without every certainty of a doubt know certain things, right? Like some beliefs we have to just choose them kind of unknowingly. Like, do we really know? I guess, like, have I personally in this body in this moment, like, witnessed and know for matter of fact that I believe in like, reincarnation or like all the things I believe in. Like, do I know 100% that I've had 100,000 lives or this or that? Well, I don't know, but yet I do. And I believe that it's best for me to just choose a belief that feels most supportive. And when I think, oh no, I truly believe I chose it all, that feels really supportive because that's very empowering versus victimizing, if that makes any sense. So that's why I just really believe that. Because if I can stand in my truth and say, I chose this life, I chose my parents, I chose these traumas, like I chose this all because it's for a bigger like purpose, then that just feels very empowering to me because it gives me this sense of choice.
Yes, and it's also aligned with truth. So it feels very, true. I
Yeah.
think, this is another aspect of the mother wound is doubting our intuition, doubting ourselves, and needing to have some kind of proof or justification or 1,000-page report experiment results that prove what we're saying instead of just like you just know inside your body's telling you this thing isn't right and I don't need to prove it to you. I just know it's right. Like so it's like that is another aspect of the mother wound that's being healed because many people have been programmed by religion and other things to not ask questions and
Yeah.
to not trust their intuition because something scary might happen and you might end up in a bad place. And it's like, that's just all programming to control, to
Hmm.
control and subjugate people and keep them from not being able to assess the truth for themselves. Like, notice what happened during COVID. Why were information wars successful is because people don't know how to trust their own intuition and check in for themselves on things. So they're like using their mind trying to decide, do I believe this report or that report? And that's just a bad place to be. You need to know how to check your own body and your own intuition and figure things out for yourself from the inside, no matter what's happening on the outside. And even if you can't prove it, it doesn't matter. Like, you know what you
Mhm.
know on the inside.
Yeah, like one of those like, "Well, why do you know?" or "How do you know?" And it's like, "I don't know how I know, I just know."
Yeah,
Like
and then
that.
we can totally get into information wars, and that's just a waste of everyone's time, I think.
Okay, so I have questions about intuition because sometimes we we're living a life and we're so misaligned, right? We're deeply conditioned, we're misaligned. We've gotten so in our head that we're not in our heart, we're not in our body, we're not in this intuitive knowing. And I do believe that the soul is always going to, like, our soul, our true like being of who we are is always going to help us redirect, which is, I say it all the time on the podcast, like, people probably get sick of hearing me say this, but I think that when we get sick, when we find ourselves chronically ill and chronically in pain, I think it's literally an indicator that we've gotten out of alignment with our truth. And that is honestly a way for our soul, in a sense, to redirect us, for whatever you believe to be God, the universe, to redirect us back into that truth. Because it's often when we find ourselves chronically ill or chronically in pain that we reach the end of the rope, as you said earlier. And that we reach that breaking point and we really are finally ready to stop and say, okay, what gives? Like, what needs to be done? What do I need to change? Like, it's almost like sometimes it has to get so bad in order for us to really get realigned again. And so the thing is what do you say to somebody who just really doesn't have that connection right now to the intuition, because they've shut it down for so long that they no longer hear it or feel it?
Yeah, I actually have many students that go through that experience, and it's hard. So one of the things I would say is that you have to rebalance your nervous system. What many people do not realize is that walking around living in beta brain, like the beta cycle brain, is not normal for humans. Actually, it's very abnormal, and it causes a lot of anxiety because it's a way of living by the mind, and then you're disconnected from your body and from your emotions and from the animal that you are, from the earth. You're disconnected from everything, and you're just like this mind. That is just not a normal way to live, and that way of living does create a lot of stress. And to cope with the stress, then you use like substances, right, like alcohol and other things to try to cope with the stress. But like, all that really needs to happen is you need to rebalance your nervous system. So there's a really simple practice that you can do. And I like to do it on the ground. Like, if you're really stressed out, like, go outside, go barefoot, sit on the ground, make sure they haven't sprayed fertilizer. I mean, like, pesticides all over the grass first, but, sit on a nice piece of clean grass on the earth, and put one hand over your heart and one hand over your belly. Even close your eyes and tune inside, like tune out the outside world, go inside, and then just take 3 deep cleansing breaths. And when I say that, I mean, let your belly expand. See, this is another mother wound that women have been told not to use belly breathing because you don't want to look fat. Like, that's a big problem. So take a deep breath in your belly, as deep as you can go, and then hold it for a few seconds and then let it out. So let's do it all together now. Let's just take a deep breath and hold and let it out. The slower that you take it in, the slower you let it out, relaxes your nervous system. So let's just take another one. Hold and breathe out. And just notice that when you slow down like that, you notice that something's hurting in your body because you're slowed down enough to notice it.
Hmm.
You notice a feeling or maybe a memory, or maybe something that happened earlier in the day that you forgot to tend to. Like all those things come rushing in to the space created by slowing down. So, one of the major ways to heal anything is to slow down and get grounded and breathe. And in that space, your whole being is going to remind you of stuff that you forgot. It's going to remind you of things you stepped over because you were too busy. It's going to remind you of all the important things in those moments that you slow down. Just like taking a shower, a lot of people say, "Oh, I get so many insights in the shower." Well, it's probably the only place you're still all day long. And so your subconscious is like, I've got to get it in there now before she starts moving, and talking and thinking and looking and all of that. So, yeah, you got to take time. And I know meditation is hard if you've got a busy mind. Um, my first my big soul retrieval I got in my lifetime was this man, Bruce, who's a Cherokee. And I'm part Cherokee. So I had visited there looking to be reconnected with my ancestry. And he just sort of flung a soul piece through the back of my head into my being, and I spent 6 years integrating that. But the first thing he said to me right after he did this thing and my brain was spinning and I was hard to think, he said, "You have too many thinking."
Mm.
And that message just kept coming up over and over again as I worked with psychics and intuitives. They're like, this man is standing behind you saying, "Too many thinking." So if you want to experience clairvoyance or psychic gifts or empathy or intuition, which are all like such beautiful experiences that can really reduce the amount of human drama in your life because you'll just know something instead of having to obsess and guess over it. If you want that, you've got to take care of this too many thinking issue. You got to find a way to do that. And there's, I can't give you the absolute surefire method because it's different for everybody because people have super tricky egos, especially people who are brilliant.
Yep.
Really smart people have a hard time quieting their minds. Feeling is the pathway to heal. All these things is because why does the brain act up like that? Because there's something uncomfortable arising in the
Uh-huh.
stillness that has been needing to be witnessed and felt, and it doesn't feel good to witness and feel it. So, yeah, you got to be present to that in yourself too and just go, okay, if I'm noticing I'm getting chatty mind, that means something painful is coming up that I need to feel. And that painful thing might be loneliness or, maybe space feels like when you were a kid and no one was home and you were all alone. That is scary to feel. But, as an adult, we can do that with our kids, our inner children. We can hold them through those experiences. And that's the work, it's bringing yourself to presence to really feel it all, your body, your emotions, notice your mind, don't give into it,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Observe it, don't attach to it.
Don't let it win. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah, right when you said that I was just cracking up inside. I'm like, oh, I relate. Okay, I have one more question about intuition and then I actually want to talk a little bit more about feeling. So, you were saying we're talking about ways to connect to our intuition. But here's an interesting one, and I want to know your opinion on this. What happens when you get two people who have completely opposite beliefs, but they both feel so adamant that their beliefs are intuitive and truth? How do you explain that? If you're well, you're on one side of the coin and I'm on the other side of the coin, but I swear it's intuitive. That's the thing is, how do we know sometimes when it is truly intuitive versus cognitive dissonance or something like that?
Well, okay, so the underlying question underneath that question is everybody experiencing the same reality at the same time? And the answer is no.
No, and I know that. Yeah.
No, not everyone's experiencing the same reality at the same time. And it's that desire for everyone to experience the same reality at the same time and everybody to get the same intuitive hit and we'd be sharing the same reality, that's what has caused all of the control and fear paradigms we're experiencing right now,
Right.
because we're trying to validate ourselves based on what somebody else is saying.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about validating yourself on the outside, it's about validating on the inside. So why do people have different perspectives? To help you validate yourself on the inside.
Mm. What is that? Can you explain what that is for somebody listening? If they don't know what validating themselves means?
Well, it's like, for example, um, you might wonder what the best decision is for you. Like a couple years ago, during the beginning of COVID, we have an annual pilgrimage we take with our community. Um, it's not my community, but it's one I engage with. And my teacher canceled the pilgrimage because of COVID. But my husband and I knew that we needed to go because we got these really strong hits that we needed to still go. So we went down to Mexico. I was terrified because just because you get a strong intuitive hit doesn't mean it's not going to be terrifying to do it. So, we went down there. We had an amazing trip. It was amazing. And we stepped deeper into our power. And we came back and, we didn't tell anybody because people were in a little bit of judgment about traveling during COVID at that time. And we just didn't really want any drama. But we knew that it was right for us. And
Mm-hmm.
we ended up healthy. Everybody was healthy. Everybody we visited was healthy. Nobody had COVID. We didn't have COVID. Everybody was fine. And so all the reason that we were afraid was kind of like, just fear. And so for us, it was a test of, are we going to follow our own intuition, even though our teachers who we look up to are doing something different? Like, are we going to change what we know about ourselves to be true to do what they know about themselves to be true? Or are we going to follow what we know to be true? So
Right.
sometimes these things get set up for that reason, so that
Mm-hmm.
you'll follow what you know to be true, because there's
Right.
a lesson in there for you. You need to follow it.
I like that. That's good. I like talking about this stuff because we give our power away so often, and we look to everyone else for the answers that we already have within us. And we it's even when we have like a coach or somebody or a mentor, it's the same thing. They could offer us insight, but if we walk away and something just doesn't feel right and we know like we need to do something else, we don't need to ask permission from that person. Like we need to only honor our own truth, what is being called of us inside. Like you didn't need to go ask your guide permission to still go. You went because it felt right for you.
Yeah, and because I trust myself.
Uh-huh.
So this is a process to trust yourself.
Mhm.
It is capital S self, not little self, but like soul self. Trusting that self, that has come to me in so many meditative journeys and plant medicine ceremonies and just deep retreats, where the message over and over and over again, trust yourself, trust
Mhm.
yourself. And for me, it has to do with this curriculum that I feel I'm in on the planet at this time, which is to step into my sovereignty. So I'm stepping into my sovereignty as a soul. And in order to step into sovereignty, I've got to be able to know to trust myself and whatever is coming up for me to do, and not be too concerned if even people I super admire don't understand what I'm talking about and they think the opposite of me. So
Mhm.
I've just learned to notice those things like, oh, this is a challenge for me because I really value that person and I appreciate them and they know something different than me. And
Mhm.
so, am I going to change myself to match them, or am I going to go ahead and be with my sovereignty? And it's hard to be with your sovereignty at this time and age because the paradigm of like patriarchal paradigms of control, like and conformity based on force, those things are really prevalent right now in the space. And a lot of people have stories about, well, I'm a good person because I'm participating in that, or you're a bad person if you don't. And I'm in the sovereignty conversation, which is a different conversation, which is all about I'm following my soul's guidance and I'm trusting that as I do that, it all makes sense in the end. And,
Mhm.
and I don't know what that is right now because I'm on the ground. in this body as Kerri, and I just have to follow the guidance I'm getting that is always right for me. So, um, yeah, it's a very challenging thing when the outside world is challenging your inside knowing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I like how you said, and sometimes that's going to show up in people you admire and other people that you trust, like who you look up to, or, you value generally like their opinions about things, but you might you might get to a situation where it's like, oh, wait, they feel different. Oh, and hey, that's okay.
It's totally okay. And
Yeah,
it's,
it's totally
this is
okay.
like, this is a one room classroom that has all grade levels inside of it at the same time. And so that's how we all get to learn and grow at the same time.
I love this. This is fun. Gosh, I could talk about this stuff all day.
Yeah.
So we keep talking about this feeling our feelings. So I kind of wanted to just go back and ask you one more question based on your experience of this. It's kind of similar to the intuition question, like, okay, well, if I'm so disconnected from my intuition, how do I get back to it? Well, same for feelings. What about somebody who's so disconnected from their emotional body, maybe to the point they're not even aware they're disconnected, right? Because they're like, oh, I get mad, or oh, I cry sometimes. I feel my emotions, but it's like they're still like, maybe they feel the easy ones, but we all, like most of us have, there's certain emotions that hit home that are harder, that our body, our minds like try to protect us from. Like, how does one begin to feel the true feelings again if they have lost sight of that?
You know, the pathway to being vulnerable, because we're really talking about is being vulnerable with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
where you don't have to repress your feelings anymore or pretend to yourself or to others that you're not feeling something. These are all defense mechanisms for protection. So the first thing is to have a safe place that you can basically fall apart. And the falling apart happens in layers. So it's a safe place when you know that you're not going to be intruded upon with advice when you didn't ask for it. It's a safe place when you know you're not going to be judged. It's a safe place when you know that the way you're being viewed in the container is with love and with total certainty that you've got it. Like, this is your path to healing and it's totally right. And there's nothing wrong here. And it's like beautiful and you're courageous and you can do this. So it's a container that doesn't give you a label and a diagnosis. It's a container that doesn't try to make something wrong with you because you're having feelings. And it's also a container that doesn't really, while it believes fully that you're having that experience, it never believes for 1 second that you're a victim. And this takes a lot of mastery to hold a container like that for another person so they can fall apart. Because in the falling apart process, you're basically like showing yourself all the ways that you defended your heart up until now out of a need to protect yourself. And you're realizing that you're safe to let down the guards and you're safe to witness yourself and you're safe to feel and you're safe to cry. You're safe to be angry. And you're guided to do all that um, little by little by letting go of the things that keep you out of the feelings. Like, in psychotherapy, sometimes what happens is that people use the story to trigger the emotion, but then to stay in it and never actually feel it to heal it. It sort of just opens the wound and then opens it wider because there isn't like direction to stop telling the story now. It's like, okay, great. You told the story. Now you're in the emotion. Now breathe and be with that emotion while I hold you. No, it's like, let me escalate that story and get even deeper into it. So there's just a level of consciousness that when the person's ready to stop suffering, they'll find one of these containers that makes it safe enough to just fall apart and let go of these defense mechanisms one by one. And it's a process. It takes dedication, willingness, practice, and commitment.
And would you say, I mean, it sounds to me like you would agree that you've had your journey and you've done the things you've done. You've had shamanic experiences and different journeys and different like experiences with, um,
with Bruce, for example. And so that's been your path. But just because that's the path you walked to healing does not mean like you're not going to go tell everybody, this is the path that you need to walk too. Like we all, like there's so many different paths that we can walk into our own healing, right?
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the core
Yeah.
messages of the second wave book is the message of the unique thumbprint journey that you have. So
Uh-huh.
your journey is unique. It's like no one else's. And as you trust yourself and you follow that journey, what unfolds before you is a beautiful synchronous experience that has been designed for you and you alone. And if you try to conform to others and if you ignore that journey, it just goes undiscovered. And to me, that is sad, the undiscovered journey. I desire everyone to discover their own path to finding that place within and that trust of self and to have that synchronous experience. So it unfolds the moment you take the action. Every action you take towards trusting yourself and doing the thing yourself is saying, you'll actually open up that journey for yourself the more you step in.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, I love that. And I love bringing that up just because it can be so easy when you're in the rut or you're at rock bottom or you're in the pain or whatever it is you're in. It's like I bring people on here all the time to share their testimonials because I love them. Who doesn't love a great testimonial? It inspires hope, and possibility. But sometimes we can like get so fixated on, oh, that worked for them, so this has to work for me, and we push and we push and we try so hard and we get so stuck in this one rigid way of doing something or approaching something when it's like this reminder that, hey, this was a testimonial to show you what's possible. But like, it doesn't mean that my path and the way it worked for me is going to work for the next person and the next person the exact same way.
Exactly. Yeah. And the moment we can accept that we're not in a conforming reality, that we're in an amazing matrix that can give every single being their own reality all at the same time and match us up at key synchronous points to have an experience, like that's magical. That's divine. That's majestic. That is amazing. And why not like step into that mystery?
Absolutely. Okay. So, Kerri, where can people find you or connect with you if they want to learn more about what you're up to and just love your message and vibe with you?
Absolutely. My website is a great place to start. It has access to my retreats and my programs and my podcast. And that is kerrihummingbird.com. That's KERRI hummingbird.com.
Okay. Are you on any social media at all?
I'm on all the places, and there's little links for that on the
Okay.
website. Yeah.
Awesome. And I'll put them in the show notes too so people
Awesome.
can just click easily. And as like one final message, what is in your heart that you think is the most important message that you would want to share with the world?
I think that my big message for this audience is to really start exploring beyond wherever it is you've gotten to at this point. So, keep exploring, keep looking, keep investigating, keep being curious. And, if what you've been doing for 15 years doesn't work, then try something new. Keep that fresh, that curiosity and that exploration. And, it's not really a problem what's happening, although oftentimes these things feel like they're problems. If you can shift perspective to see it as an opportunity to discover something about yourself that's really profound, that actually has helped me get through many of my own transformations and things that I wished would change. Um, is to just embrace, like, how is this for me and what am I learning from this that's expanding me, and why would my soul want to have this experience, because it definitely is intentional.
Mhm. I love it. I love that. Shift perspective into opportunity. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom and just who you are and sharing so much of your journey with us. And yeah, thank you for committing to yourself because, like we've already said, when you commit to you and you really step into that deep level of self-love, you're making a commitment to the whole planet. So I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Chad Smith. Have a beautiful day, everybody. Love yourself.
Yes, love yourself.
that is a wrap. And as always, I hope that today your mind got spinning in a good way, or perhaps you also had an aha moment or felt inspired in some way. I also wanted to reach out and say, do you have your own healing story or testimonial that you are ready to share? Testimonials give us hope. And you never know, maybe sharing your story out loud is the next best step in your journey. So if you do have a story and you are feeling ready, please reach out to me and let's connect. Also, don't forget to have fun rearranging a space in your house or office and enjoy that fresh feeling afterwards. And then, of course, as always, until next time, create a great week.